today's session on demography. We are going to start this paper from now onwards and we'll be continuing it. I think demography, the word, is familiar to you all, right? We always will be doing some kind of head count, even if it is a family. Let's say, we usually, when we count our relatives and all, that will be counting how many members are our relatives or how many members are our cousins, etc., etc. Then what is it we are doing? We are counting who are all our family members. If it is done at a higher level, let us say a particular area or a country or a region, then once again we are doing the same head count. How many members are there in a particular area? Or we may take a single characteristic. Let us say how many women are there or how many children are there. Whose age is less than 10 years, or how many patients are there, or how many people are working, how many people are not working. Umpteen number of characteristics we can take and we'll be doing this head counting. So this head counting is nothing but subject matter for our study, that is demography. I know it is not that simple. It is a little bit more than that. Let me start with what is demography, because sociology is linked with social demography rather than demography. Similarly, sociology is linked with population studies and social demography rather than completely highly numerical demography. So we'll be talking about what is demography, what is meant by social demography, the difference between demography, social demography, and population studies, and how social demography is linked with various other social sciences in today's session. Let us have a kind of, let's say, a sequence. This will be helpful for any students to remember about a particular topic. Our topic is demography, its nature, meaning, definition, etc. If, let us say, a question is given asking you to write an essay on the definition of social demography or the difference between demography and social demography, we should have a kind of a synopsis we usually say. So let us follow the synopsis. In fact, even your study material also follows the same method, a synoptic method we usually follow. So when we talk about the synoptic method, we'll be talking about what it is, that is definition part. What are its characteristics, that is nature, scope, or characteristics. Third one is, will this discipline or study works in isolation or in synchronization with various other social sciences or sciences, both physical as well as social sciences. We also will be putting some emphasis on how that particular discipline emerged, or rather originated, emerged, and developed, and how it got the present day structure or nature or characteristics. So we'll be talking about 4 different aspects of demography, social demography in today's session. What is meant by demography? Definition part, nature, characteristics, then historical accounts of how and when this head counting business started, how it emerged as a separate academic discipline, and what is happening now, how we are doing it, how we are doing this head counting, the difference between various sub-disciplines like social demography, population studies, etc., and its relationship with other social sciences. Let me start with the first part. I'll start with demography only. Demography is a combination of 2 Greek terms, demos plus graphy. It is not a logy. For instance, if you talk about sociology, societas plus logy, we usually say logy is a scientific study. There will be collecting information, analyzing it, preparing some theories and all that. But when we use the word graphy, we'll be narrating, we'll be describing whatever it is, as is various situation. Here, when we see the etymological definition of demography, it is not a kind of analysis and all those things. We'll be describing the characteristics of the demos or population. But of course, in order to describe the characteristics, we may have to do some analysis also. Let me take a simplest example. We may count, already I have used that word, head counting. We may count how many children are there in a country. For our common day-to-day parlance, all human beings whose age is less than 18 years are children. But there we are having various subgroups. For instance, newborn children, one-day children, or 1-year-old children, or 2 years or 3 years, you name it. Year-wise, we have different categories. The reason is the characteristics of all these subcategories are different. Let me take a simplest example. When we are talking about population, we always will be collecting and describing 3 different aspects of population. I have already mentioned head counting of human beings. The word demography can be used, if you take a broadest level definition, it can be used even for, let us say, animals or trees also. But here, when we are talking about demography, with reference to sociology, we are not referring, let us say, how many cows are there, or how many goats are there, or how many tigers are there. No. We are talking about only human beings, the count of human beings, right? When we are counting the human beings, then 2 biological events always influence the increase and decrease of the population, right? What are those 2 biological events? One is birth and another is death. So many people are taking birth. At the same time, so many people are dying, right? Not only that, people from one area to other area, they are migrating. Or people from other area, they are coming to other area. So in migration and out migration, that is the reason why we say, whenever we talk about the definition of demography, we take other concept into consideration that is known as vital statistics. What are these vital statistics? 3 in number: birth, deaths, and migration. To be precise, birth and deaths. Let me come back to the first example. It is a newly born children. In our country, per second, some 99,000 children are taking birth. But are all these 99,000 children are surviving? I know you are going to answer may or may not. Because still in our country, infant mortality rate is high compared to certain other countries. Some other children are dying. If, let us say, every second 99,000 children are taking birth, if all are surviving, you please imagine in 1 minute, how many 99,000 into 60? If it is for, let's say, 2 hours, or if it's for 24 hours, my God, it is mind-boggling. As it is, we are suffering with population explosion. The present count of human beings in our country is more than 140 crores. If only births are occurring, no deaths are occurring, yeah, will be sufficient for all these persons to stand. Forget about sitting or would say laying down, even standing also it will not be sufficient. So there is a kind of ups and downs due to births and deaths in any population. So demography narrates, describes these vital statistics of a specific population. What is meant by this specific? I have already mentioned one example. That specificity may be related to a geographical area. Say for instance, India. India is a geographical location. It has its own contours, right? It has its own boundaries. So whenever we talk about India and its population, we are talking about only population living in India. If we are talking about world's population, then we are talking about all countries put together. Altogether, UNO has recognized 195 countries, besides some protectorates and all those, or some tribal communities and all that. Now, when we talk about world population, we are talking about population of all these countries and all the human beings living in our world. So demography is counting, analyzing, and describing of human beings. Now, let me go to the second concept, that is social demography. There are many definitions for demography. Please give me some time, because we are going to enter into the historical aspect of the development of demography. There will be mentioning these aspects. Hence, here I am putting that aside for few minutes. What is meant by social demography? It's very easy, right? If you add social characteristics of demography, that is social demography. I know we are going to say, oh no, it's not that simple. Yes, it is. Yes, it is that simple. When we talk about demography, what we are doing is we are counting the births, we are counting the deaths, and we are seeing the difference between births and the deaths. Then we are saying this is a growth of population. Here we are not going into any socio-cultural aspects of various dynamics of this population. That may be fertility rate or fecundity rate or death rate. I mean, a variety of aspects are there. We are all human beings and we are all having a culture, that is way of life. So our ways of life influence the vital statistics. Let me take a simplest example. Once upon a time, I have to use this word. Once upon a time, we had a method. Still, it is prevalent in some of the communities. If you go to, let us say, Himalayan region and all that. Now, of course, Indian Penal Code clearly says committing suicide is a punishable offense. But because of certain religious aspects, committing suicide is accepted by the society. When committing suicide is accepted by the society, then when you analyze the deaths of specific age groups, in a particular age group, some kind of induced deaths will be there. In another age group, it may not be there. So here, the generalized statement related to longevity. In a particular country, people are going to live, let us say, for 60 years. For us in India, the longevity, that is a kind of, let us say, average longevity is more than 80 years. But all are not living up to their 80th year or beyond 80th year. Many people are dying even earlier. Why? There may be medical aspects, no doubt, but even these medical aspects also are linked with various socio-economic, cultural aspects. In social demography, we will be talking about this. Let me take one concept which we are going to study in detail. Differential fertility. Fertility is the capacity to give birth to children. When we talk about fertility, An average woman will be able to give birth to 8 to 10 children in her, let us say, birth-giving life. That is starting from puberty to menopause. It is a limited period. It starts with 13 years and it ends somewhere around 45 or 50 years. During this period, in our country, a lady can give birth to 8 to 10 children. But when we increase the age at the marriage, and then the fertility rate is controlled. When we increase the age at marriage, let us say we are performing marriages of children only after 21st year, and our children are, particularly girl children, are highly educated and they are working, they're career women, the fertility rate may reduce to 2 to 3, sometimes only 1, sometimes even none. Some of the countries, when the age of marriage is enhanced to 28 years, for instance, if you take Iran, for example, the age of marriage for a woman is 28 years. And afterwards, a woman has every right and she is exercising, Iranian women are exercising their right to either to go for career or go for giving birth to children. So if a woman decides that let me not go for any getting children, let me continue, then what happens? The fertility rate is controlled, not because of physical act, but because of social act. But our country is diagonally opposite to some of the developed countries. In our country, still many children, particularly girl children, are married at the age of 16 years or 17 years. Though everybody knows pretty well that these are child marriages, but still they are doing. If it is a girl is married at the age of 16 years, and we have a strong social value that married women within a year or 2 years, she has to beget a child. Otherwise, she will be labeled as a barren woman. And this labeling of barren woman she may be evicted and some of the girls may be taken as so there is no security for Indian women even today. Don't talk about women's education and all those lofty ideas. It is not there. These are not like social aspects. And these social aspects are creating what? The technical rate is being priced more or but at the same time, because of or development of the womb and body and all that coupled together, the access to health facilities, what is happening? Our mothers are dying, our infants are so maternal as well as infant mortality rate is still high compared to some other countries. It's not demography. We'll be talking about all these aspects, how society or social customs, our cultural values, or our economic position, or our psychological setup is going to define and determine the man's risk and migration. Let me take one example for migration. In some of the states, like Punjab, Haryana, we have one cultural tradition. The elder person will be doing agricultural activities. The younger sons, they are expected to go to various other places and do jobs there, whether business or another job. So migration is an accepted cultural tradition in these states. Migration will be more among the people whose age is, let us say, somewhere around 15 to 30 years or so. Here, this migration is not because of any economic conditions, but that is only because of some cultural traditions. This type of situation we will not come across in, let us say, states like Andhra Pradesh or Telangana or Odisha or to some extent Tamil Nadu. Here, whether a person leaves his place and goes to some other place or not is determined by culture. So in social demography, we are going to study all these aspects. In a nutshell, whether it is demography or social demography, we will be studying births, deaths, migration by collecting quantitative data and also qualitative data. We'll be analyzing them, right? We'll be also preparing some kind of generalizations. What is generalization? What kind of theory is it? For instance, if maternal and infant mortality rate is high, but too, girl infants mortality rate is high, then what happens? The sex ratio of a population will get affected. If the children who are dying before their first birthday are girl children, then there will not be any girls or let us say young girls or women, and even your birth rate also will come down because there are hardly any women who can give birth. If birth rate comes down, only death rate is there, then what happens? After some time, the society will not be at all. Because for society's survival, we require population. Without population, no society can survive. That is the reason many people say that in order to survive, a society should have two forces or let us say resources. Let me use it. One is you have to produce. Second one is you have to give birth to children. That is the reason why we describe the composition of population. What is meant by this composition? Let me take a simplest example. All will not be in a position to work, remunerative work. Right? These people who cannot do any remunerative work as per the societal standard are termed as dependents in democracy. Who are they? We conclude that when a person enters into his 15th year or crosses his 15th year, he enters into the working population. He or she will start doing remunerative work. This goes on till that person completes his 55th year. Of course, varies from one society to another society, depends upon the composition of that particular society. But on an average, we define people between 15 years and 55 years age group as working population. What is their duty? They are expected to produce. If let us say all persons of this working population are not doing this productivity activities, they are not producing anything, what is going to happen? Well, right? The country suffers with poverty. Let us take our own society as an example, our own country as an example. Out of 140 crores, as per 2011 census, our total population is 140 crores. Still, 2021 census are not released. Then our projections or our analysis is based upon 2011 census only. So I'm taking only 2011 census. 140 crores population is India's population. And we are having more or less equal number of men and women. Though in some areas, women are less compared to men. Out of, let us say, per 1,000 women, in some areas, we are having only 900 or 950 or 960 women. So the number of women is less. Okay, keeping this aside, we are not going to sex ratio. Keeping this aside, we know pretty well that the 50% of men are there, more or less 50% of women are there. What is happening? When we take 70 crores of men population, society expects that all these 70 crores of men should work, either in agricultural activities or service activities or business and you name it. They are expected to work and they are working. What about the women? Other 70 crores, they are not. They are not expected to work. Very few persons are working. Some are working in agricultural sector. Some are working in services sector. But industrial sector, the number of women workers is very less compared to. But even this also, this number also is compared to men is very less. Then what is happening in our country? One person is earning and two persons are eating. Can you have sufficient food? No way, right? So that's one of the reasons for our poverty. And secondly, what type of employment opportunities we are having? Most of these employment opportunities, let me continue the same example, are gender specific. A woman may not be in a position to work, let us say late night in the factory. Factories Act clearly says women should be recruited during this particular hours only, not beyond this particular time. If it is done, then what happens? So much law and order situations will emerge in the country because of societal milieu of our country. So in such a scenario, what is happening? Our poverty, unemployment, and other problems are directly linked with various socio-economic conditions. And not, let us say, because of population is very high, population explosion is there, we are suffering poverty. No. Along with population explosion, we are also having various social economic conditions. This type of analysis will be doing in demography as well as in social demography. Is this clear so far? I hope it is clear. If not, please enter into chat and let us see.
It's clear, ma'am.
Think about it. Trupthi Reddy,
It's
are
clear.
you there?
Yes, ma'am.
Anisha.
It's very clear, ma'am.
Khyati, the name is really very good. Shanta Laxmi, Sharmila.
Yes, ma'am.
Of course, others also are there. Hariprasad is there.
Yes, ma'am.
I hope so far this is clear. Is it?
Yes, ma'am.
If you are having any doubts, please stop me here and we'll see again. Can I continue?
Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am. Few more minutes we can continue.
Let me continue. Sometimes the term social demography and population studies, these two are used as synonyms, more or less same. But there are certain differences between these two also. In social demography, more emphasis will be given for social and cultural conditions of a particular population and how these social and economic conditions are influencing the population. It's a composition or dispersion or its wider statistics, that is the births, deaths, etc. All these aspects will be studying in social demography. Of course, even population studies also will be doing this too. But at the same time, we'll be having more and more numerical data in population studies. For instance, the census, it is about, it's a technical. Census is nothing but counting the population of a particular specific area. In our country, way back in 1880, we have started counting population. From that time onwards, we decided every 10 years we'll be counting how many people, not merely count, but various other socio-economic, cultural, and other characteristics also will be collecting. So population studies gives more emphasis to this numerical data, whereas social demography prefers to analyze various social conditions and how they determine and what is happening on the basis of various social conditions in a particular society and all that. This is, of course, in a nutshell, the difference between population studies and social demography. Here we may use other word also. In order to describe demography, we may use a word namely formal demography. And in order to describe the socio-cultural scenario of demography, social demography. Let us have a glance of its history. In fact, counting heads started long ago in our ancient societies, whether it is Greece or Rome or China or India. We used to count people, but at that time, counting people is not meant for analyzing its growth or its decrease or increase, etc., but to know how many people we can recruit into the army. Let us take some of the concepts, particularly from ancient Greece. We have taken various concepts related to demography. And here we usually mention some philosophers, for instance, Herodotus. Herodotus tried to count not only the number of people living in Egypt, but also the socio-cultural aspects. At one point, Herodotus writes, Egyptians are completely different from the Greek people. Not only people, even their resources like rivers also are different from the Greek people. For instance, the river Nile will have floods during the winter, whereas rivers in Greece have their floods during the rainy season. So like this, Herodotus started describing the characteristics of population in Greece and Egypt. All of you are well aware, Hippocrates, who collected patients' data in order to understand various ailments and cure for these ailments. All of you are well aware of Pythagoras, which you might have studied when you were, let us say, at school level, 22/7. I think many of us remember it. Even Pythagoras also has collected numerical data about the people. Many people, not only, let us say, Greece, but even in other European societies also, in order to propagate, let me take one example, Christian thinkers, in order to propagate their ideas and all those things, they thought, let us have an idea about how many people are there in a particular society. So they just started counting the heads. And in fact, the first textbook on, let us say, various contingencies related to demography was published in 1771. Richard Price, he has published this book. But from 1755 onwards, we will give a lot of importance to this demography. All of you are well aware, Malthus, Thomas Robert Malthus and Malthusian theory, we are going to study in detail. So in 1755, when Benjamin Franklin published one essay, it is entitled as Observations Concerning the Increase of Mankind and Peopling of Countries. Here, on the basis of this, Malthus has propounded his theory. He says, your food production grows in an arithmetic way, whereas population grows in a geometrical way. And how there will be a kind of gap between your food resources and the population. 1855, that is exactly after 100 years after Benjamin Franklin, one Belgian scholar, Achille Gillard, he tried to define for the first time what is meant by demography. What he said is, it's a natural and social history of human species. In 1860 to 1910, there are many people who try to understand the population dynamics, its growth, etc., etc., etc. And here we come across so many demographical treatises or authentic books, particularly at international level. Let me take some of the names. For instance, William Farr, he has published during 19th century. Similarly, Adolf Hitler, he has propounded so many theories related to population and its growth, increase, etc. Wilhelm Lexus is another demographer. And our sociologist, we should not forget him, Emil Durkheim. He too described the population dynamics. Similarly, Bourdieu, another demographer, who tried to develop the demography by creating so many methods. And he uses one of our toolkit and technical aspects in order to study demography. And these data collection methods are termed as direct and indirect methods. We have in our country, we are following both direct as well as indirect method, de jure and de facto methods are there. By using these methods, we usually collect data of our population. This is about social demography, and population studies and its history. Let us have, in a nutshell, how demography is linked with various other social sciences. Let me start with sociology. We have already mentioned, without people, society cannot survive at all, right? So, what type of people we require? Adolf Hitler, you know his name. Of course, I'm not going to the negative aspect of Adolf Hitler, but Hitler's research created a new study, namely eugenics. And now we are following the eugenics. Wellness of our babies. When baby is in the womb, from that time onwards, we are taking so many precautions, even afterwards also, giving boosters and all those things, particularly health-wise. We are doing that wellness or eugenics is very, very important study now. What is the reason for this? Because we require people who are not suffering with any kind of ailments. Only such people very useful for the society. All these aspects, sociology will be taking help from the demography, and demography in turn will be taking help from the sociologist. In economics is another science which is directly linked with your demography. Whatever is the model for growth, economic growth, we prepare, that is always linked with population. Forget about all those. You might have heard about per capita income, right? How do we calculate this per capita income? Total gross domestic product divided by total population. So unless and until you know total population, you cannot have any concept of per capita income, right? Then the third one is geography. Which area is more suitable for living? Which area is not? Where we can say more number of people, where we can say less number of people, where we can say more migration, where we cannot say much migration. So all these aspects describe the interlink between our social demography and geography. We are also having a link between social demography and law and jurisprudence. We will be doing a variety of laws or variety of enactments, but on what basis we should have the characteristics of some persons, right? For instance, if you take Indian Penal Code as an example, Section 84 talks about insanity. If any insane person commits any wrong, then some kind of remission will be given. He will not be sent to the jail. Instead, he will be sent to the asylum or mental hospital. Why? Why should we give this? I know anybody would question like this, right? And how can we know that? So obviously, even jurisprudence also needs data from social demography, which talks about the mental health of people. How many of a particular country's population are suffering with psychological disorders. This will become a base for some of the enactments. Similarly, you are having sciences like social psychology. Why do people form into groups? What do they do in a group? We are all having gregarious instincts because we are all primates. But this gregarious instinct creates villages, urban areas, or world-class cities, etc., etc., etc. Some of the ecological factors are there. So, in what aspects create dynamics in the population is a subject matter for social demography as well as social psychology. One more science is ecology. Ecology is nothing but study of our surroundings. These surroundings, we utilize them. That is the reason why our ecological aspects can be divided into two. One is natural one and another one is man-made one. How these man-made ecological structures are going on? It's a very interesting subject. And this interesting subject should have base from social demography only. Then only we can. For instance, one ecological process is there, social segregation. When people migrate to either city or another country, they prefer to live along with their own community people. That is known as segregation. It's an ecological process. Why do they do? This question can be answered only by social demographers and ecologists. So like this, demography and ecology also are interlinked. And I know I simply tried to give a bird's eye view of interrelationship because of the paucity of time. I request you people to go through the study material which is already sent to you. Probably you are having it. And if you are having any doubts, so let us discuss about them while recapitulating whatever we have learned today, tomorrow at the same time. Okay, until then, see you.
Thank you, ma'am.
Take care.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you, ma'am.